Hey everybody, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast, talking about anxiety and depression. Very light subjects this week. This is my beautiful wife, Abigail.
Hi.
I like saying Abigail, not Abby. It's
I'll
Abby.
I'll take it. I like Abigail.
Abigailita, if we're angry. We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety and depression today because I've had to learn how to maybe navigate this with you because you've struggled with this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually struggled with anxiety for about 11 years now, and through those years have found a lot of tools and resources that have actually helped me grow in it to where it's not keeping me from functioning in
So we're
everyday
going to
life.
explore some of that today.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully help some people, maybe with some practical stuff that they could put in place because, and I'm learning this even now, a lot of people, this impacts their life. And they might not be able to put words to it. But could you just describe a little bit of what that was like for you with, if you have anxiety or you deal with it but you're not sure what it is yet, like what can you say, this is how it felt for me? Or how it does, because it still happens.
Yeah, in a moment of feeling anxiety, a couple of things happen. My heart will race, my chest will get tight, I start to really panic, I can't breathe properly. In an extreme case, my fingers will go numb. I do feel really sick to my stomach, and it almost is like a big fog that goes over your brain and your mind and can't think straight.
Sounds not fun.
It's awful.
It sounds
And
not
I think if I have to say one thing about anxiety, it can be terrifying, but it's lame. And I say lame because I don't know if I could use another word on here for it, but it is from the pit of hell. Like, it's awful.
Yeah.
And experiencing it alone and others not understanding what it is the part that I feel like can really overtake your mind, and lead you into a depression of not feeling.
Because anxiety and depression are different.
Yeah.
And they can be blended together at times, I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
but they are different things. You can have anxiety and feel anxious, but then depression can be its own thing, and it can be they look different to different people. But what you're saying is true, because hopefully you can gather this. I have never really had the same struggle. Doesn't mean I'm any better or worse, but it has been difficult because as we've been together, I've been trying to learn what it is, how it actually impacts you, and what I should or shouldn't do. Yeah. Most of that has been found because I do the things I shouldn't. Or my immediate reaction in those moments is like, well, just don't think that way. Like, why would you, don't think about the worst case scenario. You're going to be fine, which does not help. So there's a long list of things I'm sure I can talk about if you're maybe dating or married to someone who deals with anxiety or depression that I'm learning now better. I'm not perfect yet. What you can do, we'll get to that in a minute. But would you talk a little bit about some of the practical stuff of if you experience this? Go to that section of if you experience it, or if you have, or if you are. What are some things you recommend people should do?
Well, I think it's an all-encompassing. What I've learned in my anxiety is there are so many different areas that actually it overflows into everything. But one big one for me is physical health, and I enjoy working out, but I've actually learned, I know there's a lot of science to the things that happen in your brain when you exercise. But for me, that happens naturally, but it also gives me a space to set goals for myself, and things that are terrifying for me are spaces that I can choose to take risks and show myself actually how strong I mentally can be. I know mental health, I find a lot of that in counseling and educating myself on anxiety, what it looks like, what mine looks like.
It's helpful for you to know more about why it's happening or what it is, or maybe more, because I know you really enjoy like the knowledge of it. It actually, if I could speak for you, it makes you feel empowered to understand a little bit more of what it is or what's happening or where it's coming from. And sorry to jump out of order, but back to the physical thing, it reminds me that you're trying to make sure that you do things to be healthy in all areas of life. And if in case you're listening or you're watching and you're like, well, I don't enjoy working out, that doesn't mean you need to enjoy it. I just know for you specifically, you know that when you are trying to take care of yourself and be a healthy person, it can help you to control some of the other things that you don't always have control over.
Yeah, well, and if we're going to go based off of how you feel about it, which is hard because I'm not always going to feel like going for a walk for 30 minutes. It takes just 30 minutes of getting your blood pumping to your brain, and finding health in those areas, and getting yourself to do it regardless of how you feel, because it does help.
The counseling one, would you mind talking about that for a second? Because that's been something that we both believe in highly, is getting professional help, getting counseling. But I know it can be hard for people to think, maybe, again, speaking for you, you can say it, but you can get into a mindset that's like, no, I can figure this out. I don't need other help. I can work myself out of this dark place. And a lot of times you need someone to help you. Yeah. It's not something to be done alone. That's actually probably the opposite of what people should do.
Yeah, I think counseling helps me because I know that I'm going to someone who's actually studied this. They understand the brain, are able to explain. It really helps me when someone can explain how things are connecting in my brain or what's happening in my body. It brings a little bit of normalcy to what's happening, so I don't feel completely, I feel understood. I don't feel completely on my own in it, and that is extremely empowering. Another thing that came alongside counseling was medication. And there's a stigma to both of those things, to seeing a counselor, to being on medication. And I actually found a lot of health there and a lot of freedom. Medication allows me to actually practice the tools in being healthy physically, mentally it helps, spiritually, and even like when it comes to health for my physical body in terms of what I put into it, what I eat. What I drink. I know sugar can tend to make my brain really foggy. A lot of carbs can make...
The good stuff.
Yeah, it is the good stuff, but it can make me tired, and that can often connect with some of my anxiety and how it feels, or I lack motivation, energy to do things that I know can be helpful and good for me.
What I've learned since we've been together, and you're talking about it, which is helpful, is anxiety, and I wish we could say why it happens to certain people and what it's different a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But it can be caused or triggered or come from so many different parts of you. And so many things, like what you're going to eat, like getting rest, like working out or exercising, like seeing a counselor. So I think, again, I'm repeating it, but it's the idea of there are things that you do to help you to not feel like it can just overrun you. Or you can see panic attacks happen less frequently if I do some of these things. It's not like we can guarantee that. It just means you're learning for you, Abby, what things help you to control this, because you've talked to me about it. It's not something that God's just like taken away and like, hey, magic pill, it's gone. It's more of, no, I'm learning that there are certain things I should do that are within my control to help me to manage it and to live with it, not just avoid it and hope it just walks away on its own.
Yeah, well, one big thing spiritually that I know in my relationship with God is that in my weakness is where His power is made strong, and I rest in that. One thing I do is I talk about it, even though this is terrifying to be vulnerable with a bunch of people I don't know. I've found freedom in sharing my experience. I think it gives other people the freedom to do the same thing. They feel like I'm giving them permission to share some of those things, and I've found a lot of freedom and health in that.
Absolutely. Hey, quickly before we end, because we're going to have a hard little time limit here, I do want to say just real quick some of the things that I've learned about being married to you and trying to help you through this, because I mentioned it earlier. I've done a lot of the wrong things most of the time, and I think what we've landed on is I understand anxiety a little bit better now. And I don't have to try to force you out of it or make it go away. But
try and fix it.
Or try and fix it, which I like to try to do. I can't. But to me, the things that I've learned that are helpful are understanding, first of all, just more about it, and knowing more of what you experience and what's happening, so that if it is going on, I can recognize it and not just try to ask you, like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, that's not helping anybody. It's just being aware, a little more sensitive, and also at the same time knowing that, because we have 2 kids, if things do get bad, or if you do have a rough day or a rough time, we've kind of agreed you can at least take a second and say, I'm having a hard time. I can't explain why. And I know there's things I can do to take away some pressure and some stress to let you work through it, which would be take the kid to go do something, take care of dinner. It might mean taking more than maybe my usual amount of stuff at home, but I can be intentional about doing that and knowing it's going to help you in that moment to give you some space. It's not about me pushing right there to fix it or to do any of that. It's actually the opposite. It's like, let's give you some room to process, and we will circle back and talk about it. We will come back together and pray together and see what we can do better next time. But it's been helpful to know a little bit more about how I can be supportive and not just trying to fix things right now.
It's hard to communicate to someone what you need when you don't know for yourself what you need. If I can't fix it, it's hard to tell you what to do to help me. Yeah. So learning that on both together.
And we have to talk about that when it's not happening. It can't be in the moment. It's like, well, no, when you're doing really well, that's when we have a discussion about, hey, next time, what should I do? What do you need from me? How can I? That's all the important stuff. Okay, we're out of time. Great job. Love talking with you. Hey, we're going to be done. I hope you enjoyed listening or watching this podcast. Again, this weekend coming up, we're talking about anxiety and depression. You're actually going to hear more of Abby's story on video, a little bit more of what she went through and what it looked like and how she's been able to find some healing and some growth. I want to encourage you to come to one of our churches. Make sure that you're here this weekend. We'd love to see you.